Hero specs. First releasing with Death Knight way back in 2008 with the Ratchet the Lich King expansion, we wouldn't see another hero spec until 12 years later in 2016 when the Legion expansion came and brought with it Demon Hunter, which of course has the Havoc DPS spec and Vengeance tank spec. Flash forward to 2022 and the release of Dragonflight when we received the next newest class of the game, another hero spec, the Evoker. Evoker launched with two specs itself, Devastation and Preservation, which begs the question, is Blizzard intending to introduce only two spec classes into the game in the... Hello. Pardon, they're adding what to the game? They've added a new spec to Evoker. So Demon Hunter is the only class with two specs now? Well, that's insane. Well then, with Demon Hunter being the only class in the game that has two specializations instead of the usual 3 or 4, I guess if you're a druid, you're probably wondering, what could a third Demon Hunter spec look like? Well, make sure you like the video and subscribe, and let's break it down. So first off, what are Demon Hunters? Essentially, Demon Hunters are members of the Illidari, an elite fighting force which follows Illidan Stormrage, otherwise known as Demon Daddy, who uses the powers of demons in order to fight demons. Or as the WoW wiki states, and I quote, Demon Hunters made a pact long ago to fight against the forces of chaos using their own terrible powers against it. They ritually blind themselves in exchange for spectral sight that enables them to better sense their prey. This enhanced awareness, together with their great agility and magical prowess, makes Demon Hunters unpredictable adversaries. They wield demonically charged warblades in battle and call upon demonic energies to augment their formidable combat skills. That's edgy, huh? Demon Hunters are basically the quiet emo kids from your high school sitting in the corner and listening to like, I don't know, Blink-182 or My Chemical Romance or something. I graduated high school in 2018, so those music references might vary for you. Anyways, this edginess manifests itself in-game in two specializations. Havoc Demon Hunter, who utilizes the demon power to unleash blasts of chaos damage on enemies, or to perform, and again I quote, extreme feats of agility, allowing them to flip around and do those flippy-whippy, flip stuff everyone knows and either loves or hates. Vengeance Demon Hunters, on the other hand, use the power of the demon to essentially become unkillable and use this, and I quote again, power and strength of their own suffering to inflict it back on enemies and protect themselves and allies from harm. Gee, these guys really are edgy, it's kind of crazy. But both specs are really lore enriched and are very high energy when you play them, which fits the theme for the class. Oh, did I say energy? Well, it's time for my first ever sponsorship, W Energy. Have you ever found yourself tired after coming home from work and having to jump right into chain wiping on a mythic boss for hours because your warrior just doesn't know left and right? Or found yourself falling asleep mid-keystone from all the absolute effort and focus required to have that 360 degrees of vision in order to not fell rush or backflip to your death? Well, W Energy has you covered. W Energy is a new up-and-coming energy drink supplement brand focused on bringing unique flavors and energy to gamers without any of the jitterness and crashes of competing brands. W flavors feature 0 sugar, 0 calories, no maltodextrin, no fillers, and no artificial flavors. They're made with the patented Neurofactor, which is an extract from the fruit of the Coffea arabica coffee plant, with basically those little red things that have coffee beans in them, that is designed to enhance the production of a protein in your brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor to help boost your energy and your focus. Because of this, you'll find yourself more focused and more energetic, and won't find any of the crashes or jitterness that you'd get with other brands. W is made and ships from the United States and comes in fun flavors like Dragonade, Beach and Peach, and my personal favorite, Calio Cream. You gotta love Orange Creamsicle. Follow the link in the description or use the code Voodoo10 at checkout to get 10% off your order and give me a little bit of a kickback to help support the channel. Again, big thanks to W as the first supporter of this channel, so go check them out. Now back to the video. So with a tank and a DPS specialization already in hand, what would a third specialization look like for Demon Hunter? Well, I think there's a few potential options for it. Now firstly, we're just going to address the demons in the room. I don't think another tank specialization is likely. Not only is Vengeance Demon Hunter pretty complete in terms of like fantasy and gameplay, but there really is no precedent for double tank in a class, and I also really don't know what they would do. I mean, like, again, I guess they could really always cook up something, be in the kitchen for a little while, and really just chef up another tank spec. But, you know, realistically, I think this is the least likely option. So what would be likely? Well, according to both my own thoughts as well as things I've generally heard in the community, there's most likely 4 possible ways for Blizzard to give Demon Hunter another spec. Yeah, so I think the first one being healer is kind of an insane stretch. I really don't think they're going to do this one kind of ever, but the idea of a Fell Flame healer where you kind of cauterize your allies' wounds has been thrown around for a little while. Now, I think this is an insane meme. Firstly, there's not really a basis for it established in the game's lore. Healing others was never really a thing that demon hunters could ever really do. Instead, using the demonic energies to kind of steal the life force of their enemies and kind of just give it back to themselves to heal themselves. Any healing which did happen usually kind of fell to the other troops of Illidan's army, not actually the Illidari demon hunters themselves. So demon hunters' whole thing is kind of taking the power from demons in order to avenge or hunt demons, and demons are all about fell magic and chaos magic, which isn't really conducive to healing allies. Fell is more about corrupting and like decaying, like sort of a sacrifice or a cost for insane power. We're going to touch more on that later. Now, could a healer demon hunter spec happen? I mean, like, yeah, anything could happen. They could shoehorn anything in. Like, if Blizzard really wanted to do it, it could happen. But again, I highly doubt they'd do it. There also would be some weird overlap with Preservation Evoker with that kind of healing, cauterizing flame a bit. So I don't think this is going to happen. But again, it could happen. I'm just covering my bases here, but this one's really unlikely. So healer isn't likely. So then what would be? Well, it's pretty obvious that if Demon Hunter gets another spec, it's probably going to be DPS focused. I don't think that one is that crazy of a shot in the dark. However, I do think there are a few separate ways they can go about fulfilling another DPS role for Demon Hunter. Now, the first one is going to be kind of that of a Fell-based caster. This is certainly a space that isn't that explored within Demon Hunter or the other DPS spec Havoc, and I think there is some history of casters and melee both being able to belong to one class. What with Druid having both Boomy and Feral, that means that you could see both an intellect user and an agility user in one class. But why a Fell caster? Now, the answer to that is Inquisitors. The whole thing with demon hunters is that they draw their power from demons, doing a really metal thing when they turn to kind of like rip out a demon's heart and drink the blood from that demon's heart, thus imbuing them with what's known as their inner demon, which kind of gives them all their powers. Kind of crazy, but basically that gives vengeance like those larger, genetically sturdy demons, Annihilans, Doom Guards, things like that. And Havoc gets more of the weirder, evil space goat, Eridar shaped, kind of agile death dealers. But spellcasting is also very common amongst demons. Multiple different races of demons can spellcast. You have your imps, you have your observers, you have inquisitors, to name a few. But inquisitors themselves are a major demon type entirely functioning around Fell spellcasting that isn't really drawn upon by the other two specs. Now, while the other two specs don't really draw upon this, there are some examples of some sort of Fell spellcasting in the game, specifically the Havoc PvP talent Rain from Above. This spell sees you kind of shoot up into the air on some wings, and you just cast a bunch of really powerful Fell bolts down onto your enemies. Now, this could potentially be used as the basis for some form of spec featuring a very highly mobile Fell caster that just shoots out blasts of Fell energy at a target. On top of this, Demon Hunters also have access to arcane magic or nature magic because of their upbringing as elves. Arcane magic for blood elves and nature magic for night elves. Historically, Illidan Stormrage himself was actually a mage who used the Well of Eternity before he turned himself into a demon because of Sargeras, which could give a nice duality to their spellcasting, so they're not just focused on the chaos magic, which is the same as Fell, but also have a bit of a nature or arcane tint into their own spellcasting. They can even have their own meta form. Now, I don't know what that would do, but baseline haste from Metamorphosis is something that is really good. You know, Havoc has it, but for a caster, it's very powerful. It gives you faster casts. In fact, the Warcraft 3 Demon Hunter, one of the hero specs in that game, and where the entire concept of our class is drawn from, and I will have a video on that in the future. So subscribe and turn on the notification bell for that one. But that turned your melee attacks into ranged fireballs that were like Fell damage, which could really lend some weight to this idea. Now, there are certainly problems to this one. Again, a caster doesn't really fit the thematics of Demon Hunter as a whole, as they're fast-paced, agile melee combatants who like flip and dash around the battlefield and jump around and use their agility in combat. So a planted, rooted caster doesn't make a ton of sense there. It's not insane to see if a caster fits there, as, you know, Demon Hunters themselves are one of the most magical melee in the game, alongside like Paladin and Enhancement Shaman, but it wouldn't make a ton of sense either. There's also the issue of kind of class overlap. A hyper-mobile caster does already exist in the game with Evoker, who have a ton of like mobility tools and range, and are all about casting while moving and casting and being very mobile around the battlefield. And that could obviously be worked around, and there's certainly room in the game for more than one of those. There would almost certainly be a ton of uproar from Warlocks. Now, Warlocks are always kind of upset at Demon Hunters because Demonology used to have meta as an ability, and it got removed because Demon Hunters came in. Now, I don't think Demon Hunters stole meta from Warlocks. Again, meta was a thing for Demon Hunters way back in Warcraft 3, so Warlocks stole it first, hashtag Warlockgate. But anyways, a Fel caster does already kind of exist for Destruction Warlock, who uses Chaos Magic, which again, same as Fel. Now, Destruction honestly mostly uses fire magic. Chaos Bolt is really the only chaos thing, but you know, it is their largest spender, being kind of a massive Fel nuke. And again, like, isn't that just kind of based on the meta form melee attacks from Warcraft 3? I don't know. But I don't think there'd be that much overlap here, again, because while both do draw some from Fel, Destruction Warlock is mostly fire. The caster Demon Hunter drawing from Arcane or Nature due to their Elvish heritage would also serve as some form of distinction here. So there will be some overlap, but I don't think it's enough to really be like, oh, this is dead in the water. It could happen, but we'll see. I do think it's the least likely of the 3 DPS options. I think the most likely outcome to giving Demon Hunter and other DPS would be splitting Havoc into 2 separate specs. Now, I'm saying this because I think a realistic third spec for Demon Hunter would be some sort of Warden inspired spec. Obviously not straight stolen from Wardens, as I'm assuming they might make that their own hero spec in the future, but heavily inspired by them. For those not in the loop, Wardens are basically elite members of Night Elf society, acting as a special police and jailer force. They wield glaives and special Umbra Crescent blades, and use magic and other supernatural powers to move incredibly quickly around the battlefield, throwing glaives and capturing their prey. Sound familiar? Well, it should, because they're basically like Arcane Nature Night Elf versions of Demon Hunters. Now, Havoc already basically does stuff like this with the glaives and with the Fel rushing and the zippy zappy imprisonment stuff, but the idea here would be to make its own incredibly mobile and quick spec, incorporating glaives, sigils, and other forms of magic as the main gameplay loops. This will work incredibly well for Demon Hunter, as again, we basically already have it in the Havoc tree. Now, of course, this would mean giving Havoc a bit of a redesign, and this scenario in my head, we would need to focus more on the demonic energies and inner demon that Havoc currently has, more of an immolation or a demonic I-beam based spec, which honestly isn't too bad and is more like Havoc from back in the day that a lot of people remember. This would basically give momentum and kind of the quick movement, glaive throwing stuff to this new Warden inspired spec. Now, again, of course, it wouldn't really be called Warden, as Wardens can't be Demon Hunters, but Wardens are intrinsically linked with Demon Hunters as their jailers, and already drawing inspiration from them, it wouldn't be too crazy to see that inspiration turned into its own spec, with Havoc being more turned into that demon-based melee spec. Now, again, there are issues. The biggest issue, in my opinion, is that what are they gonna fill the rest of the spec trees with? Havoc is made up of the demon and zippy fast movement stuff, and currently it can really be argued that they're not even designed that great. So how would ripping out half of that tree go, and having to build kind of the rest of that tree from the ground up? Probably not great. The same is true for the Warden based spec. While the bones of the glaive and movement stuff is there really enough in that tree for it to become its own fully fleshed out thing? It's tough to say, but if they have inspiration and if the stuff's there, it's possible for it to happen. Now, again, this is why I pick at rocks for a living and they get paid to make the game. I don't have to come up with these ideas, but the idea is there for them to kind of make this split here if there's a satisfying way to fill out the rest of the trees. And now we move on to the final possibility I've seen and kind of come up with, and in my opinion, probably the most likely, and that would be a support spec. Now, I know, why a support spec? Well, there's a few reasons, and honestly, I think if something's going to happen, it's most likely to be this. So, firstly, Blizzard needs to add more support specs to the game. I've already done a few videos about how Augmentation Evoker being the only support spec basically ruined the game, and how it has kind of broken the holy trinity of tank, healer, DPS the game has had for almost 20 years now, and by doing so, there have been drastic consequences. But they're going to add more support specs. Augmentation Evoker was received very well by people who played it, so it's not really a question of if, but of when. More support specs are almost an inevitability in order to balance out the mess that was made in the wake of Augmentation Evoker, which would have been way better received if it wasn't the only support spec, just so you know. Demon Hunter only having 2 specs means it'll probably be first up to get one, but does it make sense for the class? And honestly, I think it does. Obviously, you can probably shoehorn anything into anything else in this game if you worked hard enough to do so, but I do genuinely believe that there could be an interesting take on buff specs here. So first, what is a support? Now, supports, their main thing are to provide buffs to your allies to augment them, thus Augmentation Evoker, in some way, giving them some form of power while you yourself don't bring a ton of personal DPS or personal power. I think this makes a lot of sense for Demon Hunter though. Illidan himself was formed by being gifted power from Sargeras, the leader of the Burning Legion. I think this kind of interaction idea could form the basis of a very interesting support class, which would be giving buffs to allies at a cost. Illidan and other demon hunters pay this cost for their power through the loss of their eyes and the transformation of their bodies, but in turn they gain access to a very strong source of demonic chaos magic. Now, this could form the basic interaction of a Demon Hunter support spec, allowing large buffs to transfer to their allies, but in turn also giving them some sort of debuff or minor negative to offset that massive buff. Now, you don't want the downside to be that large, as that would just feel bad for whoever got the buff, but I think an interesting trade-off could be some buffs increasing some stats by a large amount, but also causing a decrease in others. This could work as a tool to balance out the buffs given by some sort of support spec, allowing them to give powerful large buffs that are reined in because of the downside that comes with them. I think this is a pretty interesting concept for a buff spec, and I think it's very new space that things like Augmentation Evoker haven't really treaded into yet. I do think this makes sense and fits with the class as well, as Demon Hunter is all about power at a cost, as is Fel Magic, which again is very strong, devastating magic that comes with a cost to the user. Now, I have no idea what like meta forms or what other parts of the spec would look like, but I think that this is a super interesting concept that I really do hope sees some kind of iteration and implementation to the game in the future. That's going to be what I think a third Demon Hunter spec could look like. Obviously, it really sucks that we are somehow still the only class in the game with 2 specs now that Blizzard made the decision to add in a third spec for Evoker in the middle of a tier, which is a very interesting choice. I also sadly think that we're probably not going to get one. Well, it would be cool. I don't really see Blizzard realistically adding another spec for us anytime soon, especially with neither Vengeance or Havoc being in a perfect design space. But, you know, it's fun to dream and fun to hope. So what do you think? Do you like the ideas I've come up with and presented here, or do you have your own? I've tried to be as realistic as possible here, and if there ever is another Demon Hunter spec, I wouldn't really be surprised to see something from this video show up there. Now, make sure you drop a like on the video and sub if you enjoyed. Scroll on down to the comments to find links to my Discord and to follow me on Twitch, where I stream multiple times a week. And if you really enjoy my content, consider becoming a channel member. There's a link in the description, and you get to help support me make big videos such as this one, as well as perks like emotes, exclusive videos, and access to a channel member only area of my Discord where fun things are happening. Again, I want to thank Dubby for giving the sponsorship for this video. Use code Voodoo10 at checkout for 10% off, and to support me, follow the link in the description below. And final shout out to my friend Medaral for the custom thumbnail on this video. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what your thoughts are on a Demon Hunter spec, a third spec, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. A big shout out to all of my channel members. Thank you all so much. Thank you to Andrew Kunel, 121, Payne, Andreas Latinakis, Joshua O'Connell, Period, Brad Wisniak, Zooligan, Oxclamation, It's Bulk, Flapjack67, and Spaghetti. Again, shout out to all of you guys. Thank you all so much. Apologies if I mispronounced your name, but you all are amazing and help me do this as a nice little side thing. So thank you all so much. If you want to support me, get access to cool perks, there's a link in the description, so go check that out. And thank you all again so much for watching and supporting the videos. I'll see you guys all next time. Peace.